Hello everyone and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is Cameron Bell. I am delighted to be joining you on this week's flagship show in place of young Mr. Edgar. You will hear from David later on, folks, so we will fill that Mr. Edgar-shaped hole in your life. But I'm delighted to be joined by one of my bestest buds and someone who can give me a real insight into the game that we're going to talk about, and that is Mr. Adam Thornton. Adam, welcome to the flagship. Thank you for joining me this week. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, it's wonderful to talk about two defeats. Thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, I won't ask if people are well. It feels a bit like a redundant question because Rangers did a good job of ruining my weekend in terms of we hoped that was going to be the game that would use to bounce back following the defeat to Malmo and a wee trip up to Tannadice. You thought, well, that seems like it could be a good opportunity to put us back on track, and how wrong we were, Adam.
Yeah, I think we now need a bounce back, don't we? It wasn't great. There was a wee bit of a feeling pre-game. I was talking to Martin. We said I'm not too sure about this. Thought the team was okay, all things considered. But I don't like to make big declarations with 2 or 3 games gone. But we know that midfield setups like Davis, Kamara and Jack possibly are useful for really big games away in Europe only, I would say, at this stage. But we never really used it too much last season. I think with Lundstrom, you're hoping that he's going to offer more attacking threat than he has done, although he didn't really do it at Sheffield United. But I guess it kind of stands to reason if you're playing in a less strong league, you're going to get that opportunity to drive forward yourself, given how much possession you've got of the ball. But if I'm being kind, he looks like he's taking a bit of time to adjust to having so much of the ball, and isn't quite there in terms of concentration levels, given he's probably having to do less defending than he would have done before. So there's a wee bit of adjustment there, but I think that 3 didn't quite work for me. I think we needed a bit more from deep. Obviously missing Hadji and missing Jack, as we said. Aribo probably needed a little bit further forward, given the absence of Sakala and Roof. So it's a wee bit of I was going to say jigsaw puzzle, Cammy, but it's a wee bit of like a game of Jenga just now. You kind of have to slot people in wherever you see fit. And yeah, it was insipid, I think, was probably the best word I would use to describe it.
So if we had to use a Jenga analogy, we would say a strong foundation where you take risks. You have to move the pieces about and be aggressive. Is that what you're kind of saying? Yeah, okay, that's fine. Excellent, we'll do that one now. We will talk. Let's do the starting lineup just now. Then John McLaughlin continued his place in goals in the league games as he kept Alan McGregor out. Back 4 of James Tavernier, Connor Goldson, Philip Hollander, Bona Barisic. Midfield, as you mentioned, in there had John Lundstrom, Stephen Davis, and Glenn Kamara. With Joe Aribo, Alfredo Morelos and Ryan Kent as the forward 3. Kamal Roof had to miss the game. Unfortunately, there was an incident with his son, and his son was in hospital. Everyone at Heart and Hand obviously passes on our best wishes to the Roof family, and hope for a speedy recovery. And Fashion Sakala missed out due to injury. There wasn't much given out about that, Adam, which I thought was a bit of a surprise, because your first immediate thought is, well, for missing a striker, what do we have on the bench? Cedric Itten was on the bench. He would obviously come on and play a part later on. But no Fashion Sakala, and nothing really given from the club as to regards why he wasn't there.
No, it's a bit frustrating that there has been a lot of injuries and suspensions and throughout the start, which has probably disrupted us. I was a bit surprised as well. I guess the manager wasn't asked pre-game by Sky Sports, so there's always that. The focus was maybe more on Kamar Roof, but yeah, it was disappointing. I think we've had the same with Aribo and Malmo, and then I think Hadji, there was a wee bit of debate about before the game on Tuesday as well, but he wasn't asked the question, and he didn't offer Sakala as an injury worry, which I think we now know. Looking at the bench, there wasn't a lot there, more than Tuesday night, but there wasn't a lot there, so I think that was a bit of a concern if we're looking to change the game. I think Itten and Scott Wright have potential, but again, looking at the type of game that it is, they're not really unlocking defences. They're more, I guess, what you would say is better on the counter attack. So, like I said, we are just trying to. It feels like we're just trying to get through these suspensions and injuries, etc., and get a full squad to choose from. But at the same time, we do have very important games.
Yeah, we do, and I think a welcome return for Alfredo Morelos. We'd seen obviously Morelos had been in quarantine, and Rangers had given him like an exercise bike and some free weights, and then you saw the video of him out, doing some training as well. I had said on the previous week's extra, Adam, that I think following what's happened in Malmo, it might have been a conversation around should we have given Cedric Itten minutes against Livingston. It's ifs and buts and pots and pans, and what can you do? But I think that this game was purposely engineered in order to give Alfie a start. He looked fit. He looked ready to go. There was not a question for me of any issues around fitness, etc. So quite clearly, the management staff were happy to start him. But I do believe that was with design on one eye on Tuesday night, which I think, like you say, we can all pretty much guarantee Alfie's on that starting 11.
Yeah, he looked. He looked sharp. I think we've seen that from. Well, sorry, I should say he looked lean and fit. I think we've seen that from the photos and the pictures of him running, the videos of him running around the car park, etc. But I think he is one of these players that maybe needs a little run to get sharpness back, particularly in front of goal. And I think we've seen with the one chance that he had. Well, he had two chances in the first half, but I guess the one where he kind of hits it over the left-hand post. If he'd been here a little bit longer, he might have taken an extra touch, and you never know. But I thought overall he was fine. He definitely wasn't close to being the issue. I have to say I don't necessarily agree. There's a lot of chat over Twitter and with journalists, etc., about how he should have been back earlier, and I find it a little bit unhelpful. He played in the Copa America third place playoff, so he played the day before the World Cup final. He only had, I'm not sure, 2.5 weeks possibly of a break, and then he came back and had to quarantine. So I'm not quite following the he should have been back earlier line. I don't really fully understand that. If he had come back earlier, he would have basically spent his 2.5 weeks off in a hotel quarantining, which I don't think is really fair on him, and I don't think it gives him the level of fitness that he would have wanted. So I don't quite understand the should have been back earlier narrative, which seems to be forming. I think I don't think the club could have done anything there. I don't think Morelos necessarily has to do anything there. He hasn't been back for that game because he's played a game 3 or 4 weeks earlier, which was he's been involved in a squad that was playing a game 3 or 4 weeks earlier in the Copa America. So I find that a little bit of a red herring. But in saying that, I think now that he's had that long period in the starting lineup against Dundee United, I think we expect him to maybe be a little bit more sharper on Tuesday night. And we've seen before, these are the games that he tends to come alive in. So yeah, we're hoping to see that. Yeah,
and as you say, I mean, I know obviously you're saying that he played in the third floor players in the Euros final, and it was it's the same period, and I think that people, maybe if they're grasping at straws, what they're also saying as well, that was really his only game, and therefore he shouldn't have that many minutes in his legs. What does he need a holiday for? All of that to one side, I think that you need to make sure that he's well rested for being able to come back. My concern when he came back was he might come back a little bit out of shape. He might come back a little bit, as if he's been kind of stepped. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I thought he came back in great shape. I thought he came back looking, as you say, really lean. And he quite clearly had the desire to be able to try and get out. I think, however, it is fair to say that a couple of chances, one that you mentioned there, a couple that he snatched at later on in the game, is purely just down to lack of games and lack of minutes to be able to get into that as well. And he was creating chances within that. I think you are our tactics expert, and you know a lot about this, far more than I do. I think that the thing that you can also see from Morelos, there's other players who will start to form similar ideas where they'll start to kind of get pulled out of position a little bit. Ryan Kent is one of the worst offenders for it. He did it a lot in Sweden, and I thought at times it looked like as if he was trying to get some of that happening at Tannadice on Saturday, where he was dropping a bit further back. It looked like he was trying to recycle the ball a bit more with Joe Aribo playing out in the right hand side. I actually thought that worked, and I thought that Aribo was looking pretty offensive when he was going forward. He looked positive because he wanted to go with the ball, but it just felt as if the shape started to flux a little bit too much.
Yeah, like I said, I don't necessarily think Morelos was the issue, and while Ryan Kent didn't have a good game, and didn't have a good game in midweek as well, I always give him the benefit of the doubt. And the reason I do that is because of what you said there. When he's having to come so deep to get on the ball, that's a fault of the supply line. So that's the midfield or the fullbacks not being able to get Ryan Kent the ball in a dangerous area. Yes, he was put on the ball, but you also need to think about where he's receiving the ball. If he's receiving it 10, 15, 20, even 30 yards further back than he has before, he is the type of player who's going to try and beat as many men as he can and create an opening. He's just doing it in the wrong areas of the pitch. So there's possibly an argument that he should stay up the park and wait until the ball comes to him, but it wasn't happening. So there's a little bit of both there. When he gets the ball, the quality isn't quite there at this stage in the season, but at the same time, he's having to come and find the ball, which isn't ideal. On the right-hand side, yeah, there's been a lot of chat about Lundstram. I think most of it's overplayed at this stage. I think it's just someone new coming in, taking time to adjust. I think he was way off it in that game. There is a bit of a pattern, I guess, in terms of not tracking runners in the last two games. We have had defensive mistakes outside of that that possibly would have rendered those wanderings, if you like, from Lundstram obsolete. But I just think consistency of selection is such a big thing. On the left-hand side, we know Barisic, Kamara and Kent is our strongest. On the right-hand side, there's even debate about whether Tavernier should be playing instead of Patterson. But in front of that, there's just so many options and possibilities. Even so far this season, in those three games, we've had a different central midfielder and a different right forward playing with Tavernier in each of the three games. Consistency and ability, like you said, knowing your team and knowing where someone runs, where they don't run, when they're going to tuck in, when they're going to cover, that's all part of becoming a team, and it just looks a little bit disjointed for me. Hopefully, as the manager said, that we now have a few options more than we did even at the weekend or certainly last week in terms of players coming back in, and it's players that have been big for us, and it's ball players, creative players that can take the game to Malmo. So hopefully it's just a blip and we can get these guys firing.
Well, that's what I was going to say was with Lundstram in particular, and I do want to get your kind of thoughts on this because I mean we can't get away without talking about the goal that ultimately decided the match as well. Jamie Robson is running through and Lundstram looks like he's tracking him. Now there is a wicked bounce off of Stephen Davis's thigh, which puts the ball completely over the top of the players, but Robson continued on with his run. Now, there's going to be two schools of thought on this. Lundstram should have carried on marking him and going with him, been able to try and do whatever he can at that point. And the other school is, well, there's also the back four there, and he's going to be running between Tavernier and Goldson anyway, so therefore he could almost pass him on to be able to do that. But whilst the move is happening, there's obviously a decision that's made to be there. I don't know if it's the right one or the wrong one because, again, like I say, it's apples and pears in terms of how you want to be able to try and argue it. But for me, I think he has to continue just running with him anyway. I don't know if that means then that there's a defender who's kind of saying to him, "Leave him, and I'll do my job. You stay where you are." But at the point where the ball broke for Robson, it could not have fallen for him better in terms of being able to put it by McLaughlin and come in at McLaughlin's left-hand post. It's disappointing, but this is a slight issue that I've got. I think that people, and don't get me wrong, right, we've seen it, and plenty of people within the mainstream media enjoying having a big pop at us at the moment in terms of heads are down, teams are I've heard ridiculous things like, we can't play in front of crowds, all of which is garbage, right? I'm not saying that. But there is definitely something in there where I don't know if it's a concentration lapse, brain farts, if it's just switching off at the wrong time for just even a split second. It just feels like as if it's all kind of going against us at the moment. Are you concerned about where that sits at just now, or is this something that you think the players can regroup, get a bit of refocus, and then be able to try and just, I suppose, really just pull themselves together a bit?
I would say that's just sensationalist. I don't think there's anything in that at all. Yes, based on the goals that we've conceded, all three of them having some issues down that right hand side. Yes, concerned if it's just cohesiveness in terms of getting back into the season, having players coming in and out of the team, having new players that's taking time to gel. That's fine. I think on the evidence of the last season, there's no reason to suggest that will continue for a long period of time. If we're starting to get into a situation in 5, 6, 8 games time where we're still shipping goals, then I think there is something structurally there that we probably want to look at. On the Dundee United goal, I do get your point. It takes a deflection, but Robson gambles and Robson goes. He doesn't need to. He's not suggest. I don't think he's intending to receive that ball when he passes it, but it does get deflected. But he's the one that gambles and takes it. Whether you can say it's Lundstrom that should follow him through, or whether it's Goldson or Tavernier that should come and cover. I don't know. I'd be erring on the side of the defenders should be coming out to cover that. I don't think Lundstrom does a great job. Doesn't necessarily pass him over, but given how deep it is, I think we should be looking for the defence not to be as flat there. Whether Goldson should have been a little bit further back to anticipate that, or whether Tavernier should come over and try and make that challenge. I'm not sure. All I know is, and it's similar to Malmo on Tuesday night, the three of them had a little bit of a brain fart then for both of the goals, and I think there was something similar there, maybe just not as pronounced. So I'm not sure on that one, but all I know is that Robson was sure. He made the run and it got through to him, and it was a decent finish.
I think it's fair to say that, when we've come away from it, we have to look at it in terms of the overall performance. I still had a feeling, Adam, genuinely, that goal was scored just after the hour mark, and I didn't think at that point, right, it's completely game over. My brain starts to fall into this thing. I don't know if yours is the same, that it's kind of like almost starts to break the remaining amount of time into segments. So, like, for example, if we can get a goal back in the next 10 minutes as an equaliser, then we've got, the next 15 to 20 minutes to be able to get a winner, all of that kind of thing, right? And I didn't feel at any point as if that was going to be the case, that, right, well, that's it, done, the game's burst, blah, 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 what have you. But we definitely just felt, and this is something else I want to kind of touch on as well, because I don't want to necessarily have a go at Jermaine Defoe, Cedric Itten, because there wasn't something, I think you referred to the bench earlier on about how we can look to be able to try and change the game in our favour if that had to happen. I think Cedric Itten he definitely has been able to come on and he's been able to produce, right? And he has contributed from the bench. I'm not suggesting that for a minute. But there's also a point here where I think that Jermaine Defoe, I think we need to have a larger conversation about how much he's going to be able to contribute for us at the top level, and what he can do at this point, because Defoe has been guilty at times of coming on, almost trying too hard and then causing himself a pull or a tweak, giving himself an injury, and then it's caused some time out. And there's no shame to being able to say, look, certain games, cup games potentially next Friday, and when we played in Fairland, that's the games that you'll feature more heavily in. But top flight games, maybe it's not for you. For those two coming on, I just didn't really feel as if that was going to give us much of an opportunity to be able to try and get what we were going to get out of the game.
Yeah, I don't think. Obviously, Defoe scored lots of goals for us in those situations, but I think if he's now reaching the point where he's going to be more of a coach than a striker, I think we need to back it him and give him that place in the team as, I guess, the third striker. It's kind of up for debate what Sakala and Roof really are, but I guess behind Roof and Morelos, we need to be giving Itten as much game time as we can as the focal point. He needs that, I think. My concern with him is, first of all, I think he works better in a two, and second of all, he looks like the type of player who needs a run of 5 or 6 games to really start to bed into a team. He's not going to get that with us. I think I said that at the start. His playing style, for the size that he is, his playing style is very different to what you would expect. He is quite good. He can kind of come from deep. He makes good runs into the channels, etc. I don't believe that playing style is suited to games like Saturday against Dundee United. I feel like he's maybe more of an option, which necessitates the fact, well, that is not how we play. So he's always going to have that against him in terms of not going to get a run in the team, because his skill set for me isn't quite suited to playing every single team in the league in the way that a Morelos or a Roof is. So I don't know. I do feel for him because I do like him and I do think he has contributed at times. But it's a bit of a conundrum, and certainly at this stage in the season, I don't think we can be really affording to gamble on playing players at the expense of other players in the hope that they do well. I think we'll probably want to go with tried and trusted for the early stages of the season. So yeah, bit of a strange one, but I would still say that I would be of the opinion that given Defoe's move into coaching, it would be good to invest a bit more of Defoe's minutes into it.
And it's not. And listen, I think the big thing with that is that there's maybe a bit of a wake up call with that. And I'm not suggesting for a single minute. Like Jermaine Defoe's playing career will finish. Hopefully will finish with Rangers, because I hope that Jermaine Defoe remains at Rangers for a very long time, because I think in a coaching capacity, I think he's got a tremendous personality. I think people will listen to him. I think that we've already seen other players, including our top striker, benefit from being able to try and have him there. And I get the fact that it's incredibly difficult for a player to do, is to eventually know when to hang up the boots. I think the manager will help him with that in terms of that transition with him as well. But I think you're right. I think there's a point to that where if we do have Roof and we do have Sakala, more than likely Defoe will find himself down the pecking order. But there will be games that he can contribute in terms of where that's there. Adam, let's talk a little bit around. You mentioned before about the kind of sensationalism of the reaction, etc. So let's do some cold hard numbers. Our first defeat in 41 games. This is the second time in 40 games where we've failed to score a goal. This team can regroup. This team can come back, and we're going to talk to David in just a minute around this morning's press conference. And Stephen Davis was talking around the fact that the players themselves acknowledged the performance wasn't good enough. There's no need to overreact. I think, as you say earlier on, there's no major piece that's missing here. Yes, without with injuries, suspensions, whatever, and we've got players who have been missing. I do understand that, so we're not at a fully fit squad yet. But that being said, there is an opportunity for us now to be able to try and come back collectively, and that will start tomorrow night against Malmo.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think you're right. I think it's just I'm not concerned, like you said, 41 games, one defeat. I think the obvious parallels I can see in terms of fan reaction is that Livingston game around about this time last year, or maybe 2 weeks later. But when we drew 0-0, we had the same kind of tepid performance. The tempo wasn't there at all. We were just felt like we were going through the motions, and I don't mean that in a harsh way, but it just felt like we were in that zone of let's just kick the ball and we'll try and something will happen if we keep kind of plodding and throwing crosses into the box. And it was never going to happen. We could have played for weeks that day, and never got them. And I think we probably felt the same on Saturday. The challenge is I think you mentioned there, the challenge is for the team to prove that it's just a one-off and to prove that they can then keep going from that Livingston game last year. We were almost flawless for the rest of the league campaign. So that is the challenge. You get through Tuesday night, got the cup game on Friday. Whatever comes next midweek in terms of Europe, and we start again against Ross County, and we go up there and try and get a win. And it's way too early to be talking any nonsense about getting back on track, despite the proclamations coming from the East about the new Barcelona. But I think we just need to deal with these next 4 or 5 games and see where we're at.
Yeah, and there's something to that, I think, where, and I'm keen to get your kind of opinion on that too, where I think we'd kind of discuss, I'm sure I spoke about this with Colin last week, where it was very much a kind of idea of sometimes at these things, like the longer you go unbeaten, you remember when we had it with the clean sheet record, and the longer you go unbeaten, it kind of starts to gather more weight and puts more pressure on you. And eventually, because we were not, and I hate to break this to anyone who maybe thought this before 12:30 last Saturday, we were not going to go through this season unbeaten domestically in the league. It just simply wasn't going to happen. It just never happens. But there is also a part of me that thinks maybe it's because of the time of it, Adam, because it's sandwiched in between 2 massive Champions League qualifiers. And yet all of a sudden we've kind of hit panic mode because we've now got to the stage of, well, we've lost games. What does that feel like? This is what it feels like. We've not scored. What does that feel like? Well, this is what it feels like. And now we just have to kind of take a breath, I think, and we have to trust the manager and his record, especially in European qualifiers. We have to trust this team who went unbeaten in the league last season, had one of the best defences, I think, of any Rangers team in its history. That, do you know what? We can suffer a small episode, but if you're going to do it, and this is maybe where I may get some detractors for this. If you have to lose games, it's always better to, in my opinion at least, do it at the start where you've got an opportunity to regroup to bring it back in, because you don't want to be losing this if you're in a tight title run in and then all of a sudden Arsenal start quivering. We can do this now, we can swallow it, and then, as I say, we've got to then move on. And the best way to be able to do that is to get a full Ibrox rocking tomorrow.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember saying on pods and probably saying in private quite a bit that once we got the title done, it'd be nice because you could just take a breath and not that things would mean less this year, but just that pressure and that stress was kind of lifted a little bit. I think if the last week's taught us nothing, that was just a lot of nonsense. There's always going to be the pressure and stress because of the need to win every game, and I don't think that should ever go away. And hopefully the players feel that. I do take your point. It is obviously better to have a stumble earlier in the season, provided it's not a critical one. If it gives the players a jolt, and I don't mean that in they're not up for it kind of way, but if it's maybe just a wee shock to the system, like the fans have acclimatised to having to lose games again, and maybe the players aren't used to it as well, if that is something that then refocuses the mind and we can go on a run till the end of the month, like I said, a successful one, then I think we're in a really good place there. But that is on the basis that we do actually do that. We've seen the squad react before. I think it's maybe slightly unfair if people are saying, oh, they basically didn't really need to deal with much adversity last year. I don't hugely buy into that. You've got games like Motherwell before Christmas. You've got a couple of Hibs games, Aberdeen away in January, even Celtic at Ibrox, where we weren't really great and we still managed to ground out the win. Games in Europe as well. There was a lot of adversity last year. Just because we didn't lose many games doesn't mean that there wasn't situations in games where we had to dive deep or we were on the rocks, etc. So I think the team has a big mentality, a strong mentality, and I don't think there's any questions at this stage of bottles crashing or anything like that. I don't believe that would be the case for a minute.
No, and we've seen that before. When you see, yes, albeit there's been changes, I grant you, but we look at the League Cup final and being able to just simply move past that and then get a win at Parkhead. It's things like that to my measure, you need to be able to trust in the team, trust in the process, and be able to make sure where that is. On that note, before we start talking about Malmo, let's jump in as a quick opportunity earlier on to speak to David Edgar, who was at this morning's press conference with Steven Gerrard, Stephen Davis, and also has been at Ibrox for the Malmo press conference, and Malmo were also hosting an opening training session. So let's hear from David now. And joining me now on the flagship is our very own Mr. David Edgar. David, thank you for joining us. You are currently on your way home, having been at Ibrox for the Malmo press conference and open training session. You were also part of the press conference this morning. Just to dip into that really quickly, how did you find the mood of the manager and Stephen Davis in response to Saturday's defeat at Tannadice?
Really good, actually. Anyone who's watched the gaffer in our press conference will know that there are some times he's in a really good mood and other times maybe not quite so much. But I thought he looked very confident. Didn't try to avoid the fact that Saturday was a really poor performance, but he looked, I thought, relaxed and confident, and hard to read anything into that, but he certainly looked very determined, and I thought he was in fine form, I'll put it that way.
And you took the opportunity to ask Stephen Davis how the players were looking to be able to try and regroup and make an assessment on that performance and also lift it for Malmo tomorrow night.
Yeah, I asked him about intensity because I thought that's what we lacked on Saturday. So I said to him, obviously players don't go out to play with intensity, but how can you change that so quickly that you'll deliver tomorrow? And what he said was, over the course of a season, it happens that you're not at your best. Everybody's very disappointed, but it's a case of going out in the next game and making sure that you're on it. It's a psychological point. I think if anybody could bottle intensity and be able to tell you that it will definitely be shown, it'll be on the next game. But as he said, the team has bounced back from disappointments in the past, and they're very well aware of what this game means to everyone.
And as part of Heart and Hand's media partnership with Rangers, you were also at Ibrox earlier on this afternoon to attend a Malmo press conference and also look at their open training session.
Yeah. it was their captain Andreas Christensen and their manager John Dahl Tomasson, both of whom were very impressive, incidentally fluent English speakers, and as I say, both two very intelligent guys. What was interesting to me, Cammy, coming out of it was that both of them said more than once Rangers are the favourite, and I think that's clearly been something that they've discussed. And John Dahl Tomasson a couple of times went back to, you look at the financial implications, it's so much, bigger. Rangers are so much better financially than us. So that was clearly, I think, something that they had decided they were going to try and get across in the press conference. So that happened, and they also spoke about Rangers are a good team. They've got a lot of technical players, was how they described it. And of course, John Dahl Tomasson didn't try to hide that the loss of that goal in the last minute was a big blow. He said it's a good result, but at 2-0 it would have been a perfect. So I think that we felt it was a big goal. What he said was, though, his team have got to come and handle the occasion, but footballers should want to play in front of big crowds. And he said it's about managing the expectations it's about managing to thwart the expectations of the crowd and see if you can get them to turn on the fans a wee bit, turn on the players a wee bit. So I think it's important then that we as a support are patient tomorrow night and that we stay with them throughout the game. But watching them, they looked again. They're running through their training. They're a strong bunch physically. You can see that. Technical, well organised. It's going to be a tough game.
Sorry, you broke up just a wee bit there, David. You're just saying you can see them being well organised. They are physical,
right.
and it's not going to be a pushover, is what you're saying.
No, absolutely. It's going to be a tough game. They're a good side, and they know they're in a good position. I do think because they both referred back to that last minute goal, and I'm obviously looking at it from a Rangers point of view, but I do think the fact that they both, without being prompted, went back to that last minute goal, I think it definitely did at least open up a little gap in their psychology a wee bit that hopefully we'll take advantage of.
So there's an opportunity there to hopefully go and assert ourselves from the kick-off tomorrow.
Yeah, look, see, it could be 2-1 and they'd got the last minute winner, and then they'd probably feel totally different to the way that they do. It's one of these things. Of course, it means nothing if we don't turn up tomorrow. We've got to turn up and we've got to be a lot better than we've been in the last two games. I'm confident we will be. I think we've got big players coming back. And I think the crowd is going to be epic. I really do. I think the crowd are going to be, one of those nights that everybody remembers. And
Adam and I have just kind of spoken a little bit there around there's obviously a financial reward for Malmo as much as there is for us, and quite clearly there will be one eye on the potential jackpot at the end of the rainbow.
It's interesting you say that because John Dahl Tomasson said that. He said, I keep hearing how important that is for Rangers. He did say a nice thing. He says it's great to see Rangers back where they belong. So I thought that was a nice touch. But he said, I keep hearing how important financially it is for Rangers. He says it's massive for us. He said, it's absolutely enormous for a club like Malmo. So, yeah, I think both sets of players know just how big this is tomorrow.
David, I'll let you carry on with your journey home. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure, mate. Thank you.
Adam, David, they're talking about the fact that Malmo have listen, they've got a job to do, and I think that we spoke last week that you saw the players almost burst as soon as the Stephen Davis goal went in. Of course, it's not an equaliser. Of course, everything is still in the balance, but that one, was a real damage for them. And I think that as you're hearing David talk there, Malmo will come over. They will try and do everything they possibly can to make it stuffy, to make it a bit tight. They'll want to be able to come over to make sure that we get frustrated. And whether or not that means defensively, they have to be able to camp in. They might try and stretch us a bit. We saw the high lines that they can play and how we need to take more of an opportunity to exploit that, because we didn't do so anywhere near to my liking in Sweden. But they are definitely here to be able to try and look what they can achieve. And clubs of our kind of levels, when we have to go through this prolonged qualifying process, the money is a huge incentive for them. So these guys are not here to make up numbers. They're not here just to think, right, well, we'll just see what we can do. They want to come out with purpose.
Yeah, they got in terms of the numbers, I think you're right. The league supported them the week before. They gave them the weekend off before our game. But they didn't do the same this weekend. In fact, I seen they were complaining a little bit because they were made to play on Saturday night, or Saturday 5:30, I think it was, that they kicked off. So technically we've had 5 hours more rest, plus they've got travel, etc. there, so that might have a bearing on them. Again, you need to say they're a little bit more into the season, so they might be fresher than us anyway. But there's all these little things that will come together. The away goals thing, I like away goals. I'm a fan of them. I don't see any reason for them to be taken away. I like the kind of jeopardy. I do take the point, but I feel like we have done very well with away goals over the years. Probably done badly on some occasions that I'm misremembering, but I feel like we've done okay on them. So it's really difficult to know how the game is going to go, because if I agree on Tuesday night, the goal gave us a huge boost. You could argue that it must not have given us a massive boost given the performance on Saturday, but it kind of knocked the wind out their sails a little bit. Whether or not that carries over into this game in terms of how they're feeling about that, I'm not sure if that really carries a week over, but their approach will be interesting, because if it was an away goal, we just need to get one, and then we're in the driving seat. As it stands, we need to get 2. Therefore, the expectation for us, I think, is that we come out and try and blow them away early doors. So it'll be interesting to see how they react. If they sit in and play their back 3, then that's fine. But we've seen that they're quite intelligent in terms of how they press, how they position their wide midfielders, and they'll try and cut off the supply from Barisic and Tavernier. So that's interesting, and it kind of comes back to the midfield again. Obviously no Kamara, which helps us control these type of games, but I think possibly control isn't something we're looking for in this. I don't think we need to be gung-ho, but I think we need some attacking intent from the middle of the park. So whoever plays in there, whether it's Aribo, whether it's Hadji, whether it's Arfield, partnering Davis and Lundstram, then I think what they need to do is they need to be breaking forward, and they need to be supporting, because if Malmo are going to try and effectively cut off the supply in the wide areas, we need that midfield to be getting forward in support of the front 3. That's going to be huge. But like I said, with the no away goal, it's interesting. We'll see how teams start to approach these type of games with that layer of complexity.
Well, we had it confirmed at the presser, as we were just talking about there, that Liam Balogun is going to be fit. Fashion Sakala is fit as well. And the only other guys missing will be Katic, Jack, and obviously suspension. So that also obviously means that Hadji is fit as well. So I would be pretty stunned, Adam, that given, as you say, we have to be pretty offensive minded tomorrow night, that if we don't start with a front 3 of Kent, Morelos and Hadji, I'll be very, very surprised.
Yeah, I think you could argue Sakala maybe, but given probably off the bench might be a bit more of a choice. I think if it was me, I'd probably err on playing Hadji deeper and playing Aribo up top. But either way, I think with both of them, they can play similar positions. The interesting thing for me, I guess, is at the back, because Balogun played most of the Europa games last year from memory, and certainly the games that we were playing at home. In the group stages, that we had to press and that we had to play with a high line. So given that we need the 2 goals and we want to play up and have that little bit of jeopardy in terms of Balogun's pace to cover behind, could he play? Obviously last year the decision was Balogun or Helander. I'm not suggesting for a second that Gerrard is going to not play Connor Goldson, but for me Helander is the defender at the club, if you like. So having him sit out to utilise Balogun's pace might not be a popular choice, but I just wonder, given the type of game, if that's something he would go with. So that's an interesting decision for me as well at the centre back.
What will be interesting, and I think, like you say, not to be too critical in terms of where we are, because I thought one of our main weapons has been our ability to find succinct crosses into the box. And I don't think that we saw a lot of that from James Tavernier and Borna Barisic in the last couple of games. And it's been difficult sometimes, and it's felt to me, and again, this might just be my opinion, and I'm keen to get your own, that it sometimes felt against Malmo in Sweden, the Borna just struggled a little bit to get forward. Like, it just felt as if it was a bit contained. He wasn't helped, as we mentioned earlier on, with the fact that Ryan Kent started to wander a little bit, and maybe that started to unnerve him a wee while. but we've seen what these guys can do in terms of their distribution, either from dead balls or within play, and that for me, I think just needs sharpened up a notch. I think we just need to try and recapture some of that as well, because, and listen, we've seen it not necessarily from those guys, but we've seen that a cross ball can unlock everything. I go back to Legia Warsaw, Jordan Jones, Alfredo Morelos. But that kind of quality, when you know that you've got guys who can produce it, when it's not there, it just feels like a big miss.
It does, and especially when, like we said, the fullbacks are a huge source of creativity. And most of the time it needs both of them, so that we've got that down each flank. Barisic again is a player I would class that we really see the best out of him when he gets a consistent run in the team. He didn't have any injury or many injury issues last year up until the end of the season. I think we've really seen the benefit of that. I do think he tailed off a little bit in the second half of the season compared to the first, but there could be all sorts of factors around that. But in these two games, yeah, he has looked a little bit sluggish, possibly still recovering from his injury. He also had a bit of a short break, so it might take him that little bit of getting up to speed. But for me, yeah, he's key. Certainly, as you mentioned, delivery, but also in terms of how he interacts with Kent. If he can get himself up the park and cause some damage on that left hand side and kind of pin Malmo back before they try and pin us back in the flanks, I think that would be really crucial. As always, it's how we manage it, I think, and how we attempt to assert ourselves on the game and the tempo that we play at. If we play at the tempo that we know we can, then I don't think Malmo are a team that would be able to withstand huge amounts of pressure, but it needs to be done in the right way.
Yeah, and that's, I suppose, I mean, the manager in his post-match in Sweden asked for Ibrox to get behind him. Now, listen, don't get me wrong, right? And I think you and I both seen on socials there has been a big scramble for tickets, either people looking for them or people maybe with an extra one that they're looking to try and get rid of. The club released more this afternoon, and they were gone almost instantly. So we will have a full house tomorrow, I've got no doubt about it. It's going to be a huge game for us as well. I would encourage people to absolutely get behind the team, but also show some patience as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say it's a bit of a shame. A Champions League game that you have to win is not a shame. It's something that we should still be looking forward to. But I guess that when we have the first full house, we're coming off the back of two disappointing results. I think that's maybe not great in terms of approaching this game, but I don't think that'll matter come 5 minutes before kick-off. I think we'll be right up for it. We've seen some great Champions League nights at Ibrox. We've seen some great Champions League qualifying nights at Ibrox as well. And hopefully, given everything that the team have done last year, hopefully 2 little blips will not be enough to deter us. And I think we'll be right behind the team.
Yeah, I agree with that. Totally agree with that. I think that, as you say, we're kind of all going through that roller coaster of emotions. And Saturday afternoon, we were angry and disappointed, and now we're kind of starting to kind of come out of that, and it'll just be nerves going into it tomorrow, and then that excitement, and I think it will be electric tomorrow. I really, really do. I think it's going to be fantastic to get everyone back into Ibrox for a Champions League qualifier, and just to reiterate, you know, exactly what you just said there, Adam. This is where you want to be performing. This is what you want to be included in. So don't see it as a negative, see it as a challenge, and I think that putting the trust in the manager, his staff, and also the players, I feel pretty confident that we can get what we need to tomorrow night as well. Adam, thank you very much for joining me on this particular flagship for this week. It's been great to have you on, and again, like you say, I think you've given me some confidence, a wee boost for tomorrow.
Oh, thank you. It's been wonderful to be on, and hopefully we get a couple of good results this week.
Folks, if you've enjoyed listening to myself and Adam, please jump on to our Patreon site, which is patreon.com/Heart and Hand, where you will get a number of Rangers shows every single day with an archive which has more than 5,000 podcasts in it. You'd be able to go in there and listen to your heart's content about whatever Rangers related subject you like, and a few non-Rangers related ones as well. But there's some really, really excellent stuff in there. And for experts on some of the tactical analysis like Adam, if he can explain it to me, trust me, you'll be able to understand it. Please jump on to have a wee look at that. Thank you to my guest Adam Thornton, and also thank you to our executive producers in London, Mr. Mike Lee and Mr. Paul Myers. Let's get a great result tomorrow night, folks. If you're going, make sure that everyone gets behind the team. let's absolutely get through to the next stages because we know we can do it. Let's go.